Welcome again to EduThink. This is another of our courses, Subtraction. This is an entire course, so it might cover several grades. Let's go through and look at the information. We first have our lesson instructions, our demo lesson. These are for the helpers. And then the lessons, which are for the students. As always, you have access at all times to the lessons, the lesson information, and then the exit, which provides information on the student's performance. Let's take a look at the lesson objectives. So we have problems that have the two numbers with one digit difference. And then we have a more complex problem where the top number, the minuend, can be from 10 through 20, and the student will either have a 1 or 2 digit difference. And then we have our third lesson, which is 2-digit subtraction numbers, and then 3-digit subtraction numbers. The instructional design, minimalist, always interactive, progression of problem difficulty that ensures concept mastery at each level. We have immediate and meaningful feedback that's tailored to the specific problem to help the student derive the answer. And we have embedded criterion referenced mastery. The student must get 10 answers correctly in a row before proceeding to the next lesson. Now, let's take a look at the demo lesson, which will show you what is involved. This is the 1-digit minuend and subtrahend. Current lesson, and the cursor is waiting for the student's response. And note that we have the positive feedback, the correct answer tally. We have the problem now in an equation form, and we are also showing the relationship, the converse relationship between subtraction and addition. Now we'll make a mistake to see.
9 minus 2 equals.
So we are, again, this was a randomly generated problem. We have the 9, which appeared here, and then we counted off 2 for here. So we're seeing all kinds of reinforcement of the problem in addition to the equation form.
No, 9 minus 2 equals.
So again, we're reinforcing this randomly generated problem with a number line to reinforce the concept 9 minus 2 and the equation form.
No.
And now in the third error, we have a stop sign, which the student then raises their hand for help. A helper comes over and they can see the errors that the student made and provide one-on-one help to get the answer. And here we have our feedback again, reinforcing the concepts of subtraction and addition. And we have our correct answer tally to 1.
No. 6 minus 6 equals.
So we can see a lot of reinforcement of the concepts.
No. 6 minus 6 equals.
And that demonstrates with this kind of a problem what the strategies are. Exit the demo, and then we'll go to the lessons. This is what the students see. So here we have the thumbnail that describes the strategy. 1-digit numbers from 2-digit numbers, 2-digit numbers and 3-digit numbers. Again, this represents a curriculum that could span 2 or 3 grades because it gets much more complicated.
No. 8 minus 5 equals.
And we saw this from the demo lesson. Very, very specific, reinforcing what is going on.
No. 8 minus 5 equals.
So I think we have a pretty good idea of what's happening on this lesson. Let's go to lesson 2. You can see it's a more difficult problem, and from our randomly generated problem, we have its representation on this number series, 11, and then we saw it counting off 8. So I think you can begin to see we have our randomly generated problem. We have its representation here. We have the problem and the counting off. And we have our helper to be called. These were the errors that were made, and the helper can provide one-on-one help. And one more error. You can see that all this information available to the helper can provide, if needed, another layer of help. Let's now go to Lesson 3, two-digit numbers. Again, we have our randomly generated problem and then its representation as subtraction and then also showing the relationship to addition. So now we have a much more complicated problem. This time, it's a description of what's going on. 9 is greater than 2. You must borrow from the tens digits. We are introducing place value in the context of a real problem. And then we show how these are related. Two plus 1 times 10 equals 12. So this is much more difficult and probably will need some explanation from a helper if the student isn't able to get it themselves. And then we have our equation form. They should have learned this in the second lesson. Our tally, correct answer tally going on. Let's get to a more complicated problem. These are, again, randomly generated. Okay, so now we have 10 from 5, 5 from 9, the tens digit 5 from the 10 digits 9. And we're back to our tally. Waiting for a more complicated problem. Okay, here we go. Here's one that's more difficult. So we have an explanation. 6 is greater than 1. You must borrow 1 plus 1 times 10. So we're getting a lot of different concepts in the feedback for the specific problem. Subtract 6 from 11. Again, we get our nice explanation in our feedback of what's going on. Place value, and also this nice explanation of the 1 times 10 in the tens column. We can see we're back to we missed, and we're back to our tally of 2 And again, that's why it's so nice. You must get 10 in a row correct in order to proceed, to have demonstrated mastery. Now let's go to our fourth lesson, subtracting three-digit numbers. And again, we get this nice demonstration of subtraction related to addition. And here we get a more complex problem. You can now begin to see how this is all related, and this is all just from a randomly generated problem, but the feedback is specific and reinforces these wonderful mathematical concepts. Subtract 5 from 14. And then we see wonderful information going on above. So we have 8 from 12, but we'll see what happens. So now we get a much more complicated and detailed explanation when you get a larger problem. But again, always keeping in mind place value and explanation. And in the bottom it tells you quite simply, but perhaps they won't have seen that. And we now just get our simple equation, 12 minus 8. But we'll miss it one more time. And we again will get help from a helper on one-on-one, where they get to see the problem, they get to see the students' errors, and they can help them. And this again demonstrates what the student will be needing to do when they borrowed. They have to borrow 10 from the 100ths, which reduces that to 6. And we see very detailed information, explanation of what's going on. So that explains the strategies, and we hope that students will be able to learn to subtract. All of our courses will be subjected to research, and because they are modular, additional strategies can be incorporated. Let's now exit. Let's see what's. It says that we've spent 19 minutes on this. We made 20 errors out of 48 responses, and we are exiting from lesson 4. So thank you for listening, and I hope this will be of use to you and your students. And now we're back to the eduthink.us website.